Welcome to Citizens Report. I'm Patti Ceppa. We are here today to talk about domestic violence and how it can affect our community and also discuss some domestic violence resources. I bring to you today two guests, Superintendent of Radnor Township Police Department, Chris Flanagan. Also, I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Delaware County Domestic Abuse Project. She is an expert and for sure a hero for the work that she does, Julie Avalos. Thank you both for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
Let's start with Chief Flanagan. Chief, the Radnor Police Department is taking an initiative to get this very important message out about domestic violence. What is the message to the community from the police department, and what is the work you're doing on domestic abuse?
So again, thank you for letting us speak on this important topic. And it's truly domestic abuse project of Delaware County is phenomenal and just such a huge presence and really helps us get through some situations here in Radnor and of course all the way through Delaware County. And she is a pro, my co-speaker, and I just had to thank her for her work and her team. It's important for everybody to know in a community that things can happen, no matter how nice it looks, no matter how big the house is, how small the house is, whatever your views on the things, that domestic violence can happen anywhere and at any time. And there's new challenges right now, a pandemic, in fact. And although it has affected so many, we actually did a special release with the DAP during the pandemic and the District Attorney, Jack Stolzheimer, just to talk about the sudden increase in domestic abuse cases and things that were occurring and encouraging people to speak up, use the resources that are available to them, which we'll go over in a little bit, but also know that when they don't feel safe going out of their house because of a pandemic that we've never seen before, what could be those effects to people going and getting help? There's stories of people who didn't want to go to the ER with chest pain because they thought they would get COVID. So it has to have an effect on this issue that we're talking about. And in fact, in Radnor Township, some of the calls for the domestic abuse calls or just an argument, doesn't necessarily have to be abuse, but some of them came from neighbors, which means there's a chance, only a chance, that somebody didn't want to call because they were afraid to, or it was a sudden onset problem that they weren't used to. So I want to get the message out that whether it's during a pandemic or not, reach out for help. And there's so many things that we can do. People don't have to get arrested. We want you to call 911. If you have a bad night and something horrible happens to you on a small scale or a big scale, you can reach out to the Domestic Abuse Project and get help on a very quiet, very private method to communicate. And then they can build you up from there, from counseling to legal assistance to shelter. And that's such an important thing. And I won't steal or win. The police are only part of a tool. And that's what I want to share. We're one sliver of a pie while we're trying to help you. So we don't want people to hesitate to call during a pandemic or because the police are involved. And I'll just stop at that point.
Okay, great. So let's turn it over to Julie. Maybe you could talk about the project and specifically about the resources that are available to the community.
Absolutely. So thank you all for having me. And Superintendent Flanagan, thank you for being such an amazing just advocate for the cause and really caring about victims of domestic violence in Delaware County, because to shine the limelight on family violence is what, we need to be doing collectively, and really recognizing the fact that, family violence, that's the true pandemic that is impacting our communities. So 1 in 4 women and 1 in 7 men, we oftentimes don't recognize that men are victimized as well, experience physical violence by an intimate partner. So we know there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that this is something that we're talking about, that we're educating our communities about, but we're also recognizing it's not something that should be kind of swept under the rug and thought of as like a family private matter. But it is a public health issue, and we all as community members have an opportunity to educate ourselves about what resources are out there, as well as step in when we have friends, family members, community members that are impacted. So the Domestic Abuse Project at Delaware County, or we call ourselves DAP, is the only domestic violence organization that's specifically here to serve residents of Delaware County. And we're fortunate in that we have a continuum of support services that are aimed at working with victims to help them move towards self-sufficiency. So we have a safe house shelter. We run the only domestic violence shelter in Delaware County. It's a 34-bed facility. It's specifically for women and children. However, during COVID, we've really pivoted our model of sheltering, and now we're also using hotels. So a family, a woman and child could enter our shelter, but we're also able to serve males as well as anyone kind of across the gender continuum through placing them in shelters versus being in a communal housing service. We have a team of amazing licensed clinical social workers that provide counseling services to victims, and we work both with adults, and we also have a child counselor that is able to work with children that have been exposed to domestic violence. We know in the United States, 10 million children annually are exposed to violence in the home. So in order to really address and help them heal and prevent intergenerational ongoing violence, getting connected to counseling is really, really important. So we do this both individually as well as group supports. During COVID, we have really turned towards a telehealth model. So while we can provide services in person if needed, we do and have been really successful in doing it utilizing Zoom. So our counselors are able to utilize technology to ensure that we're still providing those services to both adult and child victims. The other thing that we do is we have staff attorneys, and they're able to provide free representation to victims as they go through the PFA process, and everywhere from helping to file for an initial temporary PFA to representation on a final PFA order. And again, our attorney representation is absolutely free. So there's no charge to have an attorney. You know, we see many of our victims go to court, and their perpetrators, because they're the ones that have access to the financial resources, have a private attorney standing next to them. And so for us to ensure that we are advocating and supporting survivors, we're able to provide this service for free, which is just a phenomenal resource. In addition, we provide community education and outreach. So we're out there really providing education, just like we're doing today, to educate folks about what resources are out there and the importance of accessing services as needed. In addition, we have a 24-hour hotline. So our hotline number is 610-565-4590, and it's a 24-hour resource for anybody who wants to call and get some support.
So actually, when you mentioned PFA, I'll ask this to either one of you. Can you explain the connection, first of all, what a PFA is, but then what the connection is between the police to the DAP and the county, how you're all working together?
Well, I'll start just sort of with the legal aspect. What's great about what I'll call a partnership, even though it isn't written down with DAP and the police departments in Delaware County, but definitely this police department for sure, is that we team up. Somebody is never alone through the process. And you just heard Julie go through the amazing resource. They have attorneys, counselors, people for your children. Everybody teams together and helps you through the different barriers and challenges, because you can feel very alone and feel like nobody's there to help you. And I have to stress that is not true. It may feel that way, and I can't tell you don't feel that way, but there are so many aspects that they're going to be by your side that is the good news out of a bad situation. The protection from abuse order, nicknamed PFA, gives special permissions to the police department to arrest, charge individuals who break it. What it means to the individual is that they can list some unique circumstances and really dial in on some areas that they need to be protected from. So like workplace, children, certain aspects of it, having a subject, very importantly, turnover weapons and other things. So a judge can do it on an emergency or a regular basis, and we can get it done in the middle of the night on a weekend. There's some processes, or the police will stay with you till we can get you to a judge. And then a process starts with a more formal process up to 2 years, where the DAP team will stay with you during that process, keep us alerted to what's going on. And I'll stop there with it because I just wanted to give the legal perspective, because it's important for you to know if you are a victim or you have a loved one or a friend, a neighbor, coworker, that things can be done on a small scale or to a bigger scale if it requires. It's very adjustable and flexible. And I'll turn it over to Julie to talk about that back end or the long stretch.
Yeah, so absolutely. Our staff, and again, accessing our hotline is a great way to get connected to someone who can really support you through the process. And, going through the PFA process is one step towards ensuring safety. And it's also a process that, if you're already a victim, can be intimidating. The courts are not an easy place, and standing in front of a judge is not an easy thing. So we're fortunate in that we also have court advocates who are non-attorney advocates, but will accompany individuals through the court process, really educate them about what they can expect, what the whole system from start to finish may look like, as well as what their options are if they are filing for a protection from abuse order. And so that they're not doing it alone. And oftentimes we're working really closely with the police as well to support a victim through that process. A lot of our referrals come from police departments across the county where, a first responder may respond to a domestic, and they're able to then provide information to that victim about the domestic abuse project. And oftentimes are calling us and letting us know that there is a victim or a survivor that wants to get connected to services. And, so we really work collaboratively to ensure that we are being accessible to survivors. But again, it's so much about making sure individuals know what resources are out there. Because unless oftentimes it takes a soft hand to bring someone and refer someone over. And, the police, I think, are a key partner in that process.
Okay. So, for instance, when Chief Flanagan mentioned 2 years, so this is something that you actually will stay with a victim and support them, not just that time, but throughout a length of time if they need it.
Absolutely. So one of the things is we're really client-centered. So it depends upon what the needs of an individual are. There's some folks that will come and receive services for us, and we give them referrals, and maybe we're only working with them for 6 months and they're then okay. But there's other times that we're working with an individual for years, and it really depends upon what their needs are. One of the services that we also provide is that we have a relocation program. So we will relocate survivors depending on what their need is. So there's times that we're relocating them out of their home. Perhaps they've gotten a protection from abuse order, and they are now looking to find a new place to live. And we will be able to help them with their finances, helping to get first month, last month's security deposit, so that we can put them and support them to have their own space and own home. We also provide financial empowerment services, so really providing education around self-sufficiency and connecting folks to jobs and budget credit discussions, really with the focus of helping them with long-term self-sufficiency. So again, that can really vary. It could be a short-term service that we're providing, or like I said, we could be with someone for a couple years.
Okay, that's interesting. I'd like to ask Chief Flanagan, what do you suggest to individuals who are victims, but during this unprecedented time, we're definitely home a lot more, and sometimes they're right with their abuser, sitting right there, and they can't call. What do you suggest to them?
At some point in time, we want you to attempt to reach out to the DAP or the police or any agency that would help, or even a family friend that could make the phone call and line some things up for you. Because let's say there's so many key points that Julie went over that I want to highlight, that you can now do this online virtually. They had to change their dynamics. So you can sit in your backyard or get on your cell phone. We'll get you an app. Somebody will help you through that process so that you can actually go and speak to a counselor, feel and see somebody, so that you know that there's people with you and they're going to give you professional advice. It is important at some point in time to get professional advice. I may have a sore shoulder and I can get a couple people to tell me what happened, but there's a certain amount of time, damage can start to go on long-term and hurt. You want to get professional advice. Just like I think the police department's job is a bridge to get you to one of these specialized teams her wonderful group, so that you get the long time healing effect. Because a lot of times people think in the immediate moment, oh, I can just get through one more night of this, or it was a bad night, or it's COVID. But the reality is that's going to affect you, whether it was one night, 100 nights, for a long, long time to come. And so there's some new ways to get a hold of help. There's some new ways to heal yourself and feel better about the situation, and encourage you to keep fighting to take care of yourself. The other one that I thought was very important, and she hit on it, and I forgot about it, frankly, was about the continued cycle that can happen in families of abuse. And that is critical. And we have a couple families here. It's now been transferred to the other children, and now they are becoming abusers. We have to help everyone in the household. Anybody in those four walls, whether it's a one-bedroom apartment or a mansion, it doesn't matter. Everybody is affected, and it can be contagious. And that's something that people just don't get, and it's hard to understand that. But you have to understand that these pros here on her team from DAP take all those avenues and make sure they're covered for you, because you can't think clearly when something happens. Just like you get rear-ended in a car accident, you're all disheveled. You're not 100% sure what to do. People who show up, EMS, police, and fire, they're looking at all the different avenues to help you get through it, include getting you a tow truck and giving you a number so you can get a rental car. The same applies to a situation like domestic violence, domestic abuse. And remember, continued verbal abuse can be just as damaging. I do want to say that as well. It doesn't just have to be physical. And I'm certainly not the pro, but those are the things that can go on, including relocating. If it goes to that level, somebody's going to help you find somewhere to live, short term and potentially long term if you need it. Hopefully you don't. It's not for everybody, but if it does, these people, this amazing team is here to help you, stand behind you.
Julie, is it easy for these victims to leave their abuser? Do you see any pattern of how many times it takes them to leave?
Yeah, so, what's so interesting is I've been doing DV work for practically my whole career, probably like 18, 19 years. I'm not that old. I just, but one thing is, I've been doing this work, and folks still will ask me, why do victims stay? Why don't they stay? Why do they stay? Why don't they just leave? And I'm always kind of counter asking, well, why do perpetrators abuse? Let's go there, right? Instead of victim blaming. So, one thing that we know is that it takes up to 7 times for a victim to leave their perpetrator until they finally are able to make that change permanent. The other thing that we know is that when a victim leaves their perpetrator, within the first 3 months of leaving, they are 3 times the rate of being, or 3 times at risk of being murdered, homicide. So survivors know this, right? And when you leave, you know that your life is at risk. So oftentimes they are then going back just to maintain their own safety. The unpredictability of what can happen if you decide to leave is sometimes even scarier than just staying and working with or dealing with the abuse that's at hand. The other thing that's, really important that Chief Flanagan brought up is the fact that abuse is not just physical. The physical side effects of abuse is oftentimes the least thing that's actually impacting the individual. Economic abuse is huge. So not having access to finances limits your opportunities of what you could do if you want to leave. If you don't have access to any finances, job sabotage, you're unable to work because your perpetrator is continuously impacting your success in any employment place. You are jumping from job to job because this is happening. Ultimately, you give up and say, I'm just not going to work. I'll just stay home. You have children in the home and you want to leave. The thought of going into a shelter can feel a lot scarier than, again, staying with the abuse that seems predictable for you. The other thing is, sexual abuse, psychological abuse is another thing. It was said, psychological abuse, people can suffer from post-traumatic stress syndrome without ever being hit, just because of the psychological terror that can be placed upon a family. So there's so many reasons that, that victims feel like it might be safer just to stay, even if there's severe abuse going on, as opposed to leaving and not knowing what is going to happen post leaving, and also just feeling really, really scared because the terror that is very present is very real for families. We've had survivors come and tell us stories about how their perpetrators sleep with a gun under their pillow every night as a way to terrorize them and say, if you get up when I'm without asking me first, you know what's going to happen. And this is very real for them. So it's scary, and it takes a big step and a lot of courage to reach out for help. And that's why DAP is here. We're here, and we never tell a victim, pack your bags, let's go, you need to leave. We really safety plan with them. Really it's about, in the beginning, risk reduction, harm reduction. If your perpetrator is sleeping with a gun under the bed, how can you talk to a counselor about how to increase your safety measures during that time? Or if you're planning to leave, how can we make a longer term safety plan, maybe over the next couple of weeks, where you can exit that relationship or that house and do it in a way that's safe? So we really work with individuals depending on what their circumstances and where they are in their stage of change and readiness and safety to leave.
And I guess, would you work with the individuals as well to be like prepared? So if they come to you, but they still decide to stay, is there something you teach them or tell them if it occurs again, how to get out, what to do, or some kind of advice?
Yeah, definitely. So much of our work is around safety planning. And so we'll create individual safety plans for survivors or victims if they're still living with their abusers. So, one of the things we always say is 911 is a resource. Put it on speed dial in your phone if needed. How is it that slowly over time, we're providing financial empowerment education and helping you to open a bank account and put money aside, so that when it's time to leave, you have some resources and access to resources that can support you once you leave. How is it that we are working with you to recognize who in your network is your safety net? Do you have a friend, a cousin, a family member that could potentially be that person that is one who you're confiding in when you need someone to speak to? But if you leave, can that be a resource of a place that you can go? So really thinking about what are the different options that an individual has, really with the focus of safety and harm reduction, so that folks are able to get out, but do it in a way that's going to be safe for them.
Chief Flanagan, we're probably going to have to wrap up pretty soon. So is there some last few comments? Anything else that I missed?
There's just two things. One is I think what Julie was also addressing is, to those of you who are watching who are encouraging somebody or have a family member going through that, please don't draw the hard line because you're not walking in their shoes. And just saying you need to get up and leave is a hard thing for people to understand, especially when children are involved. So please understand, you can reach out to the DAP yourself and find out about the planning and ideas you can plan or assist a victim with, and encourage them to call DAP if you don't want the police coming. I always say, if there's a true emergency, call 911. But just drawing a hard line or saying I'm done with you or I don't understand, it's because you don't understand. And we need pros to get in there. But you as a friend or a supporter or a coworker, and we had a murder in the township, and then the other loved one killed themselves, and the workers were devastated because of this, and they felt that they could have taken more action. So I charge, first of all, the people who are amazing are the people living through this and surviving. But make sure that you reach out. You have the opportunity to use DAP as a supporter, and then get best information, best practices, and knowledgeable response and safety plans. And then for our college community, since we have such a big one here, just because you're not at home or you're young, you could be the victim of domestic violence. Please reach out. And I'll stop there so I don't tie up the time. We have just an incredible team in Delaware County. You're going to be taken care of the best they can, and they are phenomenal.
Okay, and Julie, anything else that you'd like to add?
I think that the chief said it well. DAP is here, and we work in partnership with the police, and we are a resource, and it's important that all community members are aware that if they need to reach out, they can. I'm going to just say our website is www.dapdc.org. Please check us out. In addition, our hotline number is 610-565-4590. In addition, I'm just also going to put a plug in for our thrift store. So we run a thrift store, Nana's Attic, that is in Brew Mall, in Lawrence Park Shopping Mall. And again, visit our store. All of our proceeds from the store come back to support victims of domestic violence. It is a nonprofit store, so therefore it's really supporting our organization to do the tough work that we're doing. So if you're looking to support the organization in any way, visit our thrift store, check out our website, and also like us on our Facebook page.
Well, I was honored to have you both today here, and this is a very important subject. So in closing, our residents need to know that there are resources out there. There is a system in place. And as Chief Flanagan said, you are not alone. So please reach out. That's the goal of this show today. Thank you both so much. And everybody else, stay well.